Yeah, I didn't record that because, when we post this, it could get into, copyright violations and, get your, get banned and all that type of thing. But it is illustrative sometimes of what happens with objections. And that's not what we want, and objections can happen at any time when we don't cover what the other person actually wants. And it happens mostly when we're pushing our agenda as opposed to listening to what the other person really, really wants, and peeling back those layers of understanding of what they wanted to begin with. So I'm sure we've all been in a situation when we went out to buy something, and a salesperson would come up to us and start telling us what they have, as opposed to actually listening to what we want or being honest and telling us when they don't have it. Right? Because there's, and sometimes mistakes happen, and, and that's understandable. You order something in the restaurant that's a popular dish, your server comes back and says, I'm sorry, we just ran out of it. Right? And that's understandable. That happens. But if the server comes in and asks you what you want, and, you say, well, I want something that, has a certain type of dish, and they start telling you everything else they have that is not that. Well, then you're probably going to object, right? It's going to put up resistance. And the whole point of what we're doing here with influence and persuasion and NLP and hypnosis, regardless of whether it's therapeutic or in a sales or influence situation, is we have to remove the resistance that's built up when we're not covering what the other person wants. But sometimes there will be objections. Sometimes we miss it. We're human. Sometimes something will come up with the other person as they're listening to us. A what about type of situation, or maybe they'll think of something that they didn't think about before, or maybe they'll have input from a partner or somebody who is, who they rely on, who will bring up an objection that has nothing to do with that individual, but because that individual has someone that they rely on. They'll say, well, my friend told me about this. So what about this? And even though that wasn't anything that you actually spoke about before or discussed, it still comes up and it still has to be addressed. So what are some of the things that come up in objections? Well, basically, an objection is, what are some of the objections you guys might come up with, and some of the things that
I'm already happy with my service provider.
Okay, right. So, that's one. And what happens is that is a statement, right? It could well be a belief. In most cases, it's a strategy, right? That they're running because they want to find out what you have. So people generally say something like, I'm happy with what I have already. Essentially, that's that type of statement. Well, it's very difficult to push back on that. So how would you push back on that?
What is it that they're doing? What is it you're expecting them to do that they're not doing already?
Well, sometimes you'll actually get, oh, they're doing everything I want, right? Which doesn't help you. The whole point of that, look at the structure of that, I'm already happy with what I have, right? Is basically half of the statement, right? So I'm already happy with what I have, doesn't tell you anything, and there's very little to be able to push back against because you don't have enough information, right? So in that case, you could ask, because you have to get the second part of that statement in order to understand what the objection actually is. right? So you can do it directly and ask them, okay, you know, I'm already happy with what I have. And if you just ask them, I'm curious because, right? And then they actually have to start thinking instead of throwing out a canned answer to you, right? So what we're trying to do is get past that canned answer. And most of the time when they're giving you an answer like, I'm already happy, they haven't thought about why they're happy. And if they haven't, then it's important to get them to start thinking about that, because once they start thinking, then you can redirect them into a different direction. But if they just say, was that me? That was very interesting.
That was bizarre.
I'll next do the next one on ventriloquism. If you don't have that second part in order to figure out what's actually going on, then you're just throwing darts at a dartboard, you know, with your eyes closed. Because, you know, then it's like, well, you know, you're asking Richard, you say, well, you know, what are they doing that makes you happy, right? That's one way to do it. But if you just go direct and you say, I'm just curious because, right, then it forces them to think. And what happens is they're in a pattern, right? So if you think about thinking as a lot of people give back canned answers, that's a rehearsed answer. It's a pattern. And when you interrupt that pattern, then all of a sudden there's room for you to slide new stuff in there. And it's the pattern interrupt that allows you the space to figure out what's going on. It makes them stop and reset and think about what are they actually expressing. And so that gives you the opportunity to guide them into a different area. So if you think about it in terms of patterns, right, you can handle that in a bunch of ways. But the first one I would suggest is, you know, you confront them on this. You know, it's like you could do a confrontation in a couple of different ways. And doesn't have to be, you know, no, it's not. Yes, it's like we saw, which, you know, which makes it absurd. But it could be something like, Richard, if you go back to your example, I'm already happy with what I have, essentially, right? You could say because, or I'm just curious because, if you want to soften it a little bit. Or you could say is, well, how do you know? Have you ever really thought about it? Because, you know, new offerings come out all the time. So if you start, so if Michael, so if you said, if you have a service that you're happy with, right?
Yeah.
You know what that is.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm trying to sell you a similar service, right?
Right.
And if you came to me and said, I'm happy with what I already have. Mm-hmm. Right? Go ahead. Just try it for a second.
Oh, yeah. So, I'm happy with what I already have. Thank you.
Well, I'm curious. How do you know? Because, you know, things can be very similar, but at the same time, sometimes new offerings actually give you a lot more for your money. And I suggest that, you know, we go over it, because then we can actually see and compare and maybe get you a better deal.
Sounds good.
Right.
It entices me.
Well, what happens is that if you because basically when I interrupted that pattern, because most people won't, they'll say, oh, okay. Yeah. Right. If I say, well, how do you know? Then all of a sudden you have to start thinking about it. Well, how do I know?
How do you know? Maybe you don't.
Yeah. Or maybe there's some other things that are better, that can actually work better for you. And it's like, well, there's always something that could work better, right? And we all want a better deal. So let's just take a look at it. So it's not making the big jump. And again, one of the things we did in the previous meetups was talk about most people, when they have a, when they have a problem, in your case, you're going to want to do therapeutics, but any type of influence and persuasion, is that there tends to be this desire to actually go too far and too fast for the other person to follow. So it's kind of like if you were doing, okay, so we're going to do one session and you're going to get, you're going to lose 20 pounds, right? That's a big ask, right? It doesn't mean it doesn't happen, but if you get the person started to change their lifestyle, right, which will eventually lead them within a certain reasonable time to lose 20 pounds, that's your chance of success is much better than saying, okay, now you're going to stop eating whatever you like and eat all the stuff you don't like, and then you'll lose 20 pounds. Generally that it's a big ask, and in any type of influence and persuasion, that is a big ask. And so what the important thing is to get them moving in the right direction to the point where you're building momentum. So what we just did in that example was we stopped your momentum from going in one place and then redirected it into a new possibility, right? But I had to stop you from where you were going to begin with. So it's really important to, in this case, interrupt the pattern and then put something new in there. So sometimes you can interrupt the pattern in a different way, but the how do you know is always a good one, or the because is always a good one. Well, here's another one. Somebody brings an objection, right? Name another objection that you can think of.
I've got other people cheaper.
Okay. You may be, okay, so here's another. You may be right. But until we actually look at what we can do for you against what they can do for you, then how will you know it's cheaper? Because the value might be working with us. Right. So in that case, it's not saying you're wrong, right? Which, as we saw essentially in the great sketch that we saw was just basically building up, it builds up a lot of friction, right? And it's funny, but it doesn't necessarily get you there. I mean, it's like two little kids arguing, right? When you and after a while, it doesn't matter what the argument is. It's got momentum on its own. And what we're doing here is, well, you may be right, which is now we start redirecting it into a different way. So it's not telling the other person they're wrong. Right? Because there's no point in saying you're wrong, but you can tell them they're wrong in a way that gives them more information and expands out what's on their map of the universe, where it becomes their idea to think about something else. So in Richard's example, we say, well, you may be right, but how will you know until we look at everything that we can do for you and compare? Because ultimately, the value may be working with us. Right. And so, again, it's not saying, well, you're wrong or that's not true. You say, well, it might be. Right. So if it doesn't work out, you're going to say, well, yeah, that was really good for us to find out that we're not competitive in this area. Right. And then you both leave on good terms. But at the same time, you're gathering information. It gives you more space to gather information as opposed to just trying to push your agenda on the other person. So it's carrying the other person through what they want but on your terms. Right. So again, like if you were saying, Michael, if you're doing like hypnosis for weight loss or something like that, or NLP for weight loss, or what does the person ultimately want?
To lose weight.
Well, they don't want to lose weight
To
for the
look
sake
good.
of
They
losing
wanna
weight. They
look
want to look good.
Yeah.
They want to look good. They want to be more attractive. They want to fit into better clothes. They want to look
Right.
good.
Right.
Right. So it's kind of like, why haven't they done it before?
Willpower? I don't know.
Because it's not easy. It's not necessarily enjoyable, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So when you say, okay, so let's do this so it's enjoyable for you while you do it.
Mm.
And that goes towards, let's change how you experience the world, how you experience the food that you eat, how you experience the type of exercise that you want to do. So it's something that you enjoy. Okay,
Yeah.
well, what do you like? Well, I like riding bicycles, right? Or something like that. Okay, so you get them to ride a bicycle more often or something like that. And that these are ways that you actually can tie in what they like to what's been holding them back, and it changes what's been holding them back, which is an objection essentially.
Right.
Right. So people, when they say, well, I want to exercise more, but I don't like, it's painful afterwards. Right. The next day I feel really sore.
Mm-hmm.
And so they don't want to do it anymore. But when you actually show them and tie it in with the skill sets that you're going to learn, that's actually a sign that they're doing something right.
Right.
Well, then it's not pain per se.
Right. Right.
It's actually an indication that they're actually doing something right and something they can enjoy.
Mm-hmm.
And as they continue to do it, they'll be less and less sore. And they'll be because they're getting stronger.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So again, that is overcoming that objection to them doing it, but that's an objection they may not be saying. So you may have to pull that out of them.
Mm-hmm.
And say, well, I don't like to exercise. Again, that goes up because, right? Well, then they'll have to actually express it. Once they've expressed it, then you have something to work with.
Right.
If they don't express it and you have to guess, who knows what that is, right? Sometimes it might be a valid reason. Like, look, every time I ride a bike, the neighbor's dog chases me down the street. I don't know. It's like, okay, well, have you thought about going to a different street?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. But you don't know until you actually pull it out of them. Right?
Absolutely.
So, Mark, hello, welcome.
Hey, good evening, everybody. Sorry, I'm a little late. Got some family thing to attend to.
Oh, well, hopefully it's okay.
Everything's good for now. Good to see everybody.
Okay, good. So, what questions do you have on objections?
I don't have the money.
I don't have the money. Okay. So if somebody says, I don't have the money, that's in response to something you're selling them, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So the question is, it's like, well, again, I'm curious, is it the fact that you don't want to spend the money on this? Or is there a way that we can make it so you can invest in this and then be able to get the product that you want? Right. So that's where when they say I don't have the money, right? It implies whether is it that they have no money at all, or are they just spending their money in different places?
It's the latter. They don't
Right.
want to spend the money that they do have on things that they on why they came to me for.
Right. And so that's where you go, well, is it price or is it value? You know, because I'm just curious, you know, what we're talking about, because they're not the same thing.
Then usually it's they will say price. That's the first thing that comes to them, like when they see what it is that what is that we're offering, and they say this is too much.
Right. Okay. So that's
And
good. So basically it comes down to, this is where you start to take their objection and start to break it down, right? And become more granular with the objection. So when they're saying they don't have the money, it's not that they don't have the money. Like if they had no money, that's understandable, right? They don't have any money. It's like, I have to pay for rent, I have to pay for food, you know, that type of thing. That's not your audience anyway. So, you know, it's like,
no, that's true.
right? So it's that they don't want to spend the money that they have on what you're selling necessarily because they think it's too expensive, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So that's where you start to talk to them about, is it cost, right? Or is it price? It's like, well, what's the difference? This is where you start to get granular, and then you get to actually define the terms, right? So the price is something that you pay right now. The cost is something that you may pay over time, because the cost of not doing this could be a lot more than the cost of investing in it right now. Because I take it it's a product that they could get some value out of it, right, Mark?
Definitely, yes.
Okay, so if it's something like, so the cost of not buying Bitcoin at 46, you know, when it's up to 60, is quite different from the cost of spending a couple of $1,000s at 46 and, you know, waiting a little bit and letting it grow because it's around 60 now. So that's a cost, as opposed to the price, which was a couple of $1,000s a couple of weeks ago. Right.
Yes.
So
okay, now I understand what you meant by price versus cost.
Yeah. Right. And then you can also talk about the price versus value. You know, so is it a price issue or is it a value issue? Is what I'm selling worth that amount of money? Right. And that's where you could talk about the value that they would get from investing in what you have versus the price. Right. So the price of, say, a car is what, average like $25,000-$30,000, right? If you buy a car, buy a new car, you drive it off the lot, it depreciates by half. Right.
As soon as it gets out the door, yes.
Right. So, you know, so the price of the car is not the same as the value of the car as soon as you drive it off, until you wait 25 years. And if it becomes a classic, then it's in great shape, then it can go higher. Right.
Yeah.
But, you know, in that case, you better have a nice place to store it, park it indoors, and, you know, all that type of thing. But it's not the same. So that's where you break down the argument by getting more granular and understand, being able to set the terms of what you're talking about. Right. So, and again, that comes back to breaking the pattern. Right. So the pattern is, somebody says, oh, it's too expensive, right? Or I don't have the money. Right. That's often a pattern. It's often a conditioned response that people have. And well, because, so when you say, is it the price or is it the value? Right. Well, that takes it out of, I don't have the money. Right.
Oh, okay.
Because are we talking price or are we talking value? Or are we talking cost? Well, what's the difference? It's like, well, the price is what you're spending now, right? The value is what you can get out of it. So if it's an investment, that's something else. If it's like who here remembers what was that movie? Pulp Fiction.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, Michael remembers Pulp Fiction because he's an actor, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Remember the $5 shake? Never had a $5 shake before. Yeah.
that must be one tasty milkshake.
Right. Right. So that right in there, you have the price. It's $5 milkshake. Right. The value, right? Is it a really good milkshake? Right. And then you have cost. He had to try it because the cost, if he didn't try it, would be higher than the $5. Right. So right in there, you have three things you can break down their argument on, their objection, when you're defining the different pieces, and you're trying to find out, because they haven't defined it, which one to start talking about. And they all work together, but not when they're all jumbled together. They work together when you actually pull them apart, and then you can go back and forth between them. So if they start talking about the price, in this case, the $5 milkshake, right? It's like, why is that worth $5? It's like, because it's better. Not because it's $5, but it's better because it's really good, and therefore worth $5. Right? But you don't have to have it. I'll just enjoy the $5 milkshake, and you could be okay without having it. No, he's going to want it.
And that would be the cost.
Right. Because it's the fear of missing out cost in this case.
Oh, okay.
Right. And it's the same thing with Bitcoin. That's why Bitcoin jumped up so much. When Elon Musk threw $1 billion into Bitcoin, everybody was like, there must be something there. Right. So the cost of not investing is greater than the cost of buying some. Right. Who here has looked at digital product online? Hey, Michael, have you ever looked at digital product online?
Are you talking about the non-fungible?
No, just like information products and things like that.
Oh no, I'm not familiar.
Okay. So in a lot of digital product marketing, right, is they say, we have 3 left. Right?
Mm-hmm.
It's digital product. You only have 3 left. And yet people will spend the money on it.
Right. There's an urgency. There's a call to action there. Yeah.
And there's a fear of missing out.
There's a fear of missing out. Yeah.
Right. So if you look at the marketing on all of those things, right, it goes towards, you'll get this product, right? And this product is valued at $999, but you can have it for $12.
Mm-hmm.
And you get all of these extras, which are other digital products, for free, but their value is $12,000, right? But there's only 2 of these left. So, so you can get it for $12 when, and get all, get like $5,000 worth of extras for free. Right. And so, and then they'll put a countdown on it.
Yeah. Well,
right.
Now that you mention it's like I'm very familiar with it.
But when you think about it, it's a digital product.
Yeah.
All I have to do is hit copy. Yeah, there's another one. But people actually feel that very, very strongly. And so that's using some of these levers when you have an objection. So very few people are going to say, well, wait, this thing's only worth like $12 because they're giving, yeah, I mean, it doesn't matter how much extra they're giving you, but they pile that on because it puts pressure on you.
Mm-hmm.
And it puts pressure on you that you're missing out on this deal.
Yeah.
Right. And then you think, well, yeah, maybe that is worth, maybe not $12,000, but maybe it's worth $1,200 and I'm still paying $12. So, okay, well, in that case, then it becomes an investment, right? So it becomes, so it becomes the value of it, right? Is still equal to what I'm paying, right? Even though realistically, there's a lot more than 2 left. Yeah. Right. So in that case, they get momentum going their way and they carry you through. Yeah. So that overcomes the objection by breaking it down and making the person think. When you get the person thinking, that's when you can direct their thoughts in a different direction. It's only when people take an entrenched position that it makes it very difficult to do that. Mm-hmm. And you'll get that in therapeutics. You'll get it in the sales and marketing situation. But the therapeutics, like the worst thing, and if you go into it, right, you're still thinking about it, is when you have somebody come, for say like like a smoking session, like they want to stop smoking, but they don't really want to stop. Right. So it becomes, before you go into the session, it's always good to ask, well, what makes you want to stop? Right. What's changed? And if they give you something, hey, my wife's making me come here, stop.
All right. It's over.
Well, that's not going to happen. Right. So they're not going to do it. And so basically the person has to really want to do it themselves.
Yeah, I think that's always number one. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Well, it's clearly, if not number one, definitely 1A.
1A, yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And so with any objection, it's the person has to want to do it, because it's not, you wouldn't go into a situation where, say, you had to take your car in to be repaired, right? Mm-hmm. And this happens a lot in the therapeutic things where, the intervention didn't work. And you say, well, the patient just wasn't ready for it. It's like, well, if you bring your car in to get repaired, you come back and, the mechanic says, well, I'm sorry, your car just wasn't ready to be fixed. That doesn't, it's not a good answer. Right? Right. So that's why we don't treat objections the same way, where it's like we let them go. We have to break them down to understand if they're really against it, or if it's actually just a strategy they're running, or a canned response, or something that they need more information on. Because again, it's up to us to provide that, to put more things on their map of their reality. Mm-hmm. Right? Because most of the time people don't even think about that they could do something different. It's like, have you ever thought about doing something different? Most of the time they say no.
Yeah.
Have you ever thought about maybe eating better? No. Right. It's kind of like, I like McDonald's. Well, you don't have to stop eating McDonald's. You don't have to eat it every day. But if you cut down and start enjoying other things, then you can enjoy McDonald's too. Now, wouldn't it be better than to have more choice? And that sounds a lot better than, no, you can't have a Big Mac ever again.
Right.
Right. So, what other objections do you guys come up against?
It's too good to be true.
Mm.
Okay. Well, you're right. It is. It is too good to be true. And that's why it's something I want to discuss with you and give you more information, because it's too good to be true if you didn't have to do anything for it to work. But if you put in the work, then you can make anything happen and make it true. Right?
Yeah.
Mark?
I never thought of that, but I was never taught that response.
Oh,
But yeah, that definitely will open them to see. Well, one, it'll stop them in their tracks. It's like it's like it'll stop their thought, and they'll get them to really think about it.
right. It's a pattern.
To really think about it. Yeah.
It's you're interrupting their pattern and say, it's too good to be true. It's like, you're right.
Oh, that's the shock, because they'll be like, what? They didn't expect that. They wouldn't expect that.
Right.
Oh, well, yeah, you're right. When you say it's too good to be true, and then you say you're right, you're like, what?
Right. It breaks the pattern, right? And it opens them up to thinking differently. So you're right. It is too good to be true if you didn't actually have to work at it. Yeah, if it was just something you put your money into, and and all of a sudden you're a millionaire, well, that would be too good to be true. I'd agree. But we know most of the time life doesn't work that way. But it gives you the opportunity to work towards something and to put together something that actually will get you to this point. Well, that makes it an opportunity. So if you'd like to explore it, I'd love to go over it with you. Right. And see, that then takes it from being, really theoretical to something that is much more solid. Yeah, that's much more real. Right. Because we all know that most of the time you have to work for what you want. But at the same time, if they give you a way to do it where you can be successful, then it could be worth investing in. And then sometimes we get lucky. Like if you invested in Apple back when it was $35 a share. When it was doing really bad.
Yeah, I sold it, damn it.
You see? Have some faith. So when you think about objections, think about it in terms of patterns. That the person is in a pattern, that they can't see what you're trying to convey. And in order to get them to see it, you have to get them out of that pattern. And when they get out of that pattern, then they have new possibilities open up for them. Yeah, because you've interrupted the pattern, and that gives you space to slide new things in there and open up their vision of what's possible. Now, that's not to say you should manipulate people into, doing what they absolutely don't want. Now, like I said, if they absolutely don't have the money, like if they don't have any money, then they're not your target anyway. They're not your target audience, and they're not really your customer. But that's where you say, look, I'd like to stay in touch with you to the point, for when you do have it, because I think this could be something that would help you, create an even bigger cushion for yourself when you have, the extra funds to do it, right? That is a way of, keeping the dialogue open with them, because just because they don't have money now doesn't mean they won't later. And if it is a situation where they essentially can't see spending the money on this, then it's important to figure out, what their objection actually is, right? So it's never good to take that first objection without getting an understanding of whether it's a real objection or whether they're actually just throwing out. And if it's a real objection, like, I could see, then you have to accept it. So, questions? Richard, Mark?
Well, I missed the first half, so I gotta wait for the replay.
Well, you missed the best part, which was the Monty Python sketch.
Yeah, that's not in the replay.
Yeah.
No, that I will send you the link to it.
You offset objections before they come up.
Generally, you basically, if you're talking in terms of criteria and values. I just put in the notes to the link to the sketch, because again, that's where, if you get into an argument with somebody, there's no reason to argue with them about something if they're objecting. The whole point is to find out if the objection is something they've thought about and actually something that they that is a deeply held objection. And by that I mean it's something they can't do, or something they absolutely just don't want to do. Or is it something that is just kind of a canned response? Is it a reaction? Is it a pattern? And that's why when you ask, how do you know? Or because, or, basically, if you're not getting the full equation, essentially, where they just say, like, it's too expensive without any context, then it's really hard to understand, what the objection actually is. So it's important to pare down, to go through those different layers to find out, is there a real objection, or is it, essentially a pattern that's going on? And sometimes it's a strategy even, where they'll always object because they figure if they object, you'll come down in your price, right? So that's happened quite a lot. So the next part is to take it to the next level, where where you actually go with them, and then when you redirect, you actually do it with a story, because stories are very, very powerful. And we have a whole one, Michael, on stories. So if you go back and look at it, hopefully you'll have some fun. I think you'll appreciate it as an actor, because one of the ways we learn is by story. The way we learn new things is by story even. That's why the best types of commercials have a story attached to them. A lot of companies right now, they do a lot of in their about us, they talk about, how committed they are to the environment or to social causes or things like that, because they want to be part of the story. Some of them, let's be honest, are just giving lip service to it, because because we know that is not true. You could say you're all for civil rights and all that stuff, and then you have, like, essentially slave child labor, making
Right,
products
exactly.
in other countries.
Yeah.
It's not quite congruous. I won't name, the names of the companies doing that, but we all know.
I know exactly.
So, but it all goes towards story. And when you have the objections, a lot of times, when you actually break the pattern, when you interrupt the pattern, and you use a story to actually fill in the gaps, then it becomes even more powerful. So if you go back for the example, Richard, you had an example earlier on, right? Richard, are you there?
Yeah.
Yeah, you had an example earlier on of an objection.
Yeah.
Right? So let's go through it, except that we're going to use a story with it as well.
I think your commission is a bit high. Could you please give us a break? Because we have to buy as well.
Okay.
And we're giving you 2 deals, really. So, you can help us out.
Okay, well, you just gave, that's not an objection. You actually gave like all the levers. You gave the criterion values of the person. Right. So sometimes they have what's called criterion values, what the people really want. Right. And so in this case, this is Richard. This
Okay.
was
I like what you have to say, but I have another interview. I want to just check the other person out.
Okay, great. Because
Well, I want to see what they have to say, too, because
right. Well, I understand that, and I certainly understand that, and I had another client very similar to you, who actually, initially interviewed quite a number of different people in the business, and they went with the person who promised them the world and gave them a discount on fees, and said that they could get things done, and even promised them that they would close the deal in 30 to 45 days. 6 months later, they called me up, and they were desperate to actually get things done, and I was wondering, what had happened to them. And I heard their whole story where, they went with a person who promised them everything, as opposed to somebody who has the reputation in the business, who's been doing this a long time, and who actually has buyers for what they wanted. And, unfortunately, they actually ended up wasting a lot of time, which translated into a lot of money that they could have had in their pocket had they not, just gone with us to begin with. And I appreciate that. So I'm not saying you shouldn't interview other people. I'm saying just think about how quickly you want your deal to close and how quickly we can do that with our capabilities. So when would be a good time to follow up with you?
Tomorrow.
Excellent. So, let's set a time and I will be happy to give you a call then.
Okay.
So how was that for you?
It was good, but I want to get the contract now. I don't want to wait till tomorrow. So,
well, sometimes you have to give them a little bit of breathing space,
Well,
but you can also add in, or we can just, all right, we can just sign now and save you all that problem.
Yeah, let's just do it.
Right. So by using a story, you can actually put in a lot of things that would be very abrasive if you just told them directly.
Very good.
Right. But you don't have to refer to anybody in particular or anything like that. But, you're trying to pull in all of those bullet points together into a narrative that makes sense to them.
Yeah.
Right. And, this way you're also balancing out what they want with what they're afraid of. Right. So I know Richard's in real estate. So, people are afraid of missing out on when hoping they'll sell before prices go down. They want to get the best prices. They want to get, pay the fewest fees and all that type of thing. And then, when you talk about it and you balance that against, okay, well, maybe somebody will give you a lower fee, but it could be that they can't move the house. They can't market it properly. And then they'll miss, high real estate values. So if the prices of real estate come down, doesn't matter how low the fee is, because it's going to be based on a much lower sales price. Right. So there's a lot of levers that you can use, but you can't just tell them that directly. That's like inside talk. You have to, by using the story, you make it accessible to them. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And so that's why having these stories, and you have a lot of experience. You've been doing what you do successfully for a long time. I think if you pull together a couple of different stories, depending on your on different situations you've come across that are pretty common,
That's true.
it'll be easy for you to just pull them out.
Yeah.
Now, the thing is, you don't have to, because you haven't enough, but this way it gets you into the habit of thinking in terms of those stories.
Yeah.
And then you can start pulling them together into different situations. And again, they're teaching stories. You're not a reporter, so they don't have to be, quote unquote, exactly factional. They don't have to be factual from that standpoint, because some of the biggest truths are in fiction. But but fiction that's based on universal truths is literature, and it stays with us. Why is Shakespeare still popular? Because look, Sons of Anarchy. Who watched Sons of Anarchy?
I watched a couple. It's pretty good.
Yeah,
It's Hamlet.
it is. Yeah.
Right.
But that's why it works so well. Right? So, and it became, realistically, who thought a show about a biker gang would actually be that successful? Where it even has a spin-off about another biker gang successful. So who would have thought? But it is. And because there are certain universal themes that are, that are really popular, that resonate with all of us. Harry Potter, right? Harry Potter is essentially Snow White. Right? He's actually, the orphan who is actually the prince. And it repeats over and over again, in all of throughout different cultures. So it's something that's pretty universal, right? And so why is it popular? Right? So that's why the power of story is so important, especially when handling objections, because the story takes the person out of the objections. So I think story is kind of the universal way of conveying information, whether you're teaching, whether you're doing objection mastery, whether you're doing influence and persuasion. Milton Erickson's very famous hypnotist, has his own way of doing hypnosis, basically told stories. I think he's overcomplicated. It helps if you have hours and hours and hours to do it in. If you're on an hour session, I think you can narrow that down a little bit. But these are essentially teaching stories, and so they don't have to be. You're not a reporter. In this case, you're conveying information, and you're getting somebody to think differently. And it's the reason why we do that with children. And we're conditioned since the time we're children, because we've listened to so many stories, watched so many stories, that once somebody tells us a story, we just listen to it. We're not trying to break it down. We're not trying to analyze it like we would a documentary or something like that. And the best ones, the best documentaries, are actually have a great narrative to it. You know, so anybody who watches a really good documentary, there's a real narrative to it that's compelling, that makes it interesting. Even certain things like when they're told well as a story, I was just looking through it, and there was a Perfect Storm, right? So the movie Perfect Storm, realistically, it's about a bunch of guys who went fishing and drowned, essentially, and made some bad decisions along the way because they knew there was a big storm coming. Right? But the story is compelling because of the way it's told. And so that's why it was such a successful movie. The acting was good, but it wasn't just about the acting. It was about, they got into the motivations and, you know, why people were doing things. And that's why that translated into now Deadliest Catch, which is like a tremendously successful TV show. You know, because, you know, the personalities aside, they're doing something that's compelling. And there's a lot of lessons to, you know, what they do about, you know, about hard work, about sticking to things, about, you know, sometimes you have to go above and beyond. You can't slack. You have to, you know, there's a lot there that's all packaged into something that's, you know, reality TV, which is in a certain sense a documentary. It's just not seen that way, but it is true. That's, you know, it's a documentary format, essentially. And so it doesn't have to be all real. And we know it's not real because it's cut. But they're trying to convey something that's deeper and wider than what you're seeing just on that little thing. And if you step back, it's like, yeah, it's a bunch of guys, they go out, they, you know, catch crab, they probably don't take a lot of showers, it smells, it's, you know, it's tough work, and they make a lot of money in a short amount of time if they're lucky. But, you know, and it's dangerous, but very few people actually die on the show. When they die, you don't see it generally. So, you know, they tell you it's really dangerous, but, you know, these guys are professionals, so they generally know what they're doing. You know, it's a different way of telling the story and handling the objections. So that's why I think when most people talk about handling objections, they actually are talking about, you know, confronting the objections and telling, essentially doing as little as possible to mollify the person in order to get them to move forward. Now, this, the idea for this came, I was on a coaching call with another one of my clients, and they have a roofing business. And what happens is there was a miscommunication because the person wanted a certain color and at the last minute changed their mind. And there was a miscommunication between the crew and the supplier, and they put the original color the person wanted on. Now, what happened in this case is that the person, and this is an example where some people sometimes have buyer's remorse on something. And so, you know, they thought, oh, it's going to be pretty expensive if we have to totally replace it, because essentially they're doing another roof, you know. And what happened is generally when somebody has buyer's remorse is, you know, when they haven't yet like finished the deal, is because they've blown up the pictures in their mind about what it's going to look like or what it's going to be like. And, you know, they've run this movie on it where they've created all types of problems for themselves. In this case, you know, when the person saw it, they were like a little upset, but not nearly as upset as you would think, because it was their first choice. So when they saw it, they probably saw the sample, then they said, okay, well, I think I like this, it looks good. Then in between the time that they signed and the time that that it was going to happen, they probably blew it up in their mind and thought, oh, this is going to look terrible. And yet when they saw it on the house, they said, yeah, actually that looks pretty good. Right. And so what happens, that's when you have to understand the role of time between the initial interaction and the objection. So if the objection is right away, then we can handle it the way we talked about earlier. If there's a time difference in between, like say you're scheduled to do something, like Richard, with your business in real estate, you're scheduled to close, and then all of a sudden the person is starting to talk about, oh, maybe I shouldn't buy this house and all that type of thing. It's primarily because they've thought about it and they've started creating a narrative in their own mind, right? Where they're actually blowing out, things that, they're not sure of, or distorting the pictures in their mind of what it is. And so that's why I would suggest that it's always good to go back to what they originally liked about it and bring them back from that movie that they've created in their mind. And so in this case, like with my client who, in the roofing business, essentially when that person saw it, it brought them back into that original picture. And so, yes, that's saying, we realized there was a misunderstanding, which is not the same as a mistake, because there was a miscommunication, and it really was in this case. Yeah, if it was a totally different thing that they messed up, then yeah, you own the mistake, right? In this case, it was a miscommunication, and this was your original choice, right? So it brings them back into that original picture. So how can we make this right for you? And it turned out they just got a small discount on it, right? Which was fine. Everybody was happy. And it turns out that it actually looked good. So let's go into what Richard had asked originally about how, and I think Mark, you were interested in this, is how do you handle objections before they happen? So the way to do that is to speak to their criteria and values, which is what they really want. And so if you ask somebody at the beginning of your interaction, what's important for you about whatever it is the interaction's about? In Richard's case, it's about real estate. In Mark's case, Mark, I don't know what your product is.
Well, I actually sell a real estate education.
Okay. Yeah. So it's real estate
and
education.
Also real estate. I'm a community of real estate investors.
Mm-hmm.
But the onboarding process is to get them interested in getting involved with the education.
Okay. So, so these are people who are primarily looking for another career, right?
Yes.
Right. So that's what you say. Well, what's important for you, in a new career? Right. Somebody out in the wind? Or does somebody have ghosts, which is a different type of show? Very popular, apparently. I don't know why. But, just what I was asking for you, Michael, I thank you for coming to this and putting in the time, but I'm just curious, what's important for you about, learning hypnosis and NLP?
Oh, I mean, just I think it's fascinating, and to have a career or to do NLP would be fun. I would enjoy it, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's really important to enjoy it, and really, I think there's a lot of value to be gained where you can use it in different areas of your life, and just the way you communicate, as well as, if you want to continue to act. It's a lot of the skill sets are very important, and the way you use your voice and your body and all that I think would be very helpful for you.
Absolutely.
Right. And so that's talking to your criteria and values.
That's right. Yep.
And so when we stay on that, as opposed to pushing my agenda, well, I think you can make a lot of money with this. I think you can actually, dominate the world and all that. No, but you don't want to hear that. That's not really what you're in it for. Right. So
Right.
it's really handling the objection before it happens by speaking to what you want and how it can help you. As well as, if I can't deliver that, if that's not what I do, being totally honest with you and saying, I really appreciate you telling me that. That's not what we're doing here. But I know some people who can help you with that. I'd love to introduce you to them. But, this is what we do. And by being honest with it, it's most people don't. They won't tell you. So it's really refreshing when they do. B, it's really very few people ask what's important for you about certain things, especially because they're trying to sell you on something. And when you ask those things and then you stay on that topic and you show them how what you're doing matches what they want, then you don't get objections generally. It's when you wander off of that you get objections. And that also tells you that you may want to go back to the criteria and values and just explore those a little bit more to make sure you actually got them. Does that make sense, Richard? Richard? You're on mute. I hope it makes sense, since that was for him. So it's eliciting those criteria and values that allows the person to open up. And at the same time, it gives you an idea of what to talk about and how to talk about it in a way that makes sense to the other person. Right. And so it's kind of interesting. There are some people I even respect who don't value, they don't really understand how criteria and values are used in this context, because they don't do it that way. And they'll say, well, that's just for therapy. I say it's for therapy, it's for everything else too. Because in therapy, it's like, well, what do you if somebody says, I want to quit smoking, well, what are you trying to achieve? What's important for you about quitting smoking? Right? Oh, well, I want to feel better. I want to be able to exercise, run around with my kids and all that. That's very different from, I just don't want to smoke anymore. Right? Because there's other things that person wants with it. Right? So that's a lifestyle that person wants to build that goes beyond just the smoking piece. Right? Because it's like, you can quit smoking, but if that doesn't necessarily allow you to run around with your kids. Right? It doesn't allow you to put a lot more money in your pocket. I was in New York one time. I was at a deli, and cigarettes were like $18 a pack.
Oh my God.
It's like $18 a pack. What are you crazy? And that was a couple of years ago. So I didn't even know how much they are now. That's a lot of money, right? It's a lot of money that they're burning up. So I would say, in that case, though, there's a lot more to what that person wants than just not smoking. In that case, but it could be that the person just, I just, I'm over it. I'm tired of doing it. I feel like I don't have control. That's a different type of criteria and value. And so that's why, in order to make what you want to do more effective, it's important to find out what that is. But it's the same thing in any other type of persuasion situation. Somebody's buying a house, right? It's important to find out what those things. Somebody is changing careers. It's very important to figure that out, because if they don't, what happens is they go back to what's familiar, right? Because we all tend to go towards what's familiar as opposed to what is unknown. Because when something is unknown, it's unconsciously viewed as being scary and dangerous, right? That's why most people don't go exploring things. They view it as dangerous. It's unconsciously viewed as dangerous. That's where you get people who don't want to go into dark places, right? It's potentially dangerous. I'm from Manhattan. Manhattan is generally well lit, but when it's not well lit, you're damn sure it's dangerous. So that's what I'm saying. It's there is understanding these things and really being able to set that at the beginning keeps the objection from happening on the back end. So in a case of a therapeutic situation, they'll go back to what's familiar. And in this case, it'll be either like overeating or eating the wrong types of food, or going back to smoking, or going back to other things, because they don't have anything to replace what they want, right? So they go back into what's familiar. It's always important to find out what they want and where they're going, as opposed to just saying, okay, well, we're just going to do this and you'll stop smoking. That's a short-term solution because they're going to go to what's familiar. And it's the same thing with the objection. So if you don't find out the criterion values first, in order to speak to it, the objection will come up, because it's different from, you're showing them something different from what they're used to. So what they're used to is going to come out of that, is going to create that objection. And that goes, but what about, well, maybe I don't have this, or maybe I don't have that. Now, one of the interesting things is I relocated from, New York City to the San Diego area. I was recruited for a job, and I was there for about 12 years. And realistically, New York is a very convenient place to live. Stuff is open all the time. You could just go walking into a deli 24 hours a day and get food and all that type of stuff. California is not quite as easy. A lot of stuff closes early. There are places that are open, and you have to drive there, right? But at the end of the day, you can still get pretty much everything. It may not be the same brand or anything like that over there, right? You have Best mayonnaise, and over the East Coast you have Hellman's mayonnaise, and they're made by the same company. It's the exact same product, and that's why their slogan is "Bring out your Hellman's and bring out your best." Right? They throw in both brands into the same thing, and it's the same exact product. Right? On the East Coast, you have Maxwell House Coffee. On the West Coast, you have Folgers. It's owned by the same company. But it's still the same products, and you can get pretty much everything. It's just you may not get there in the same way. And that's kind of an interesting thing, in that if you know what you want and you concentrate on that, and you know what the other person wants, and you concentrate on what they want, you won't get the objections that you do if you're concentrating on only what you want, right? So whether it's in therapy, whether it's in sales, influence and persuasion, anything like that, rather than wasting your time pushing somebody into something, it's just really easy to find what they want, and if you can give it to them, everybody will be happy. If you can't and you're honest about it, you'll still actually make a great contact who will refer you to people because they can trust you. So, questions? Mark, are you there?
Yes.
Questions?
Getting back to what you said earlier, what you like you said, well, the question was what's important to you about blank, right?
Yeah.
It's like there was like two parts that I forgot how you expressed how you illustrated. One was based on a certain criteria, and the other was like based on a generic answer. How do you get to that criteria of a person? Because it was just like,
oh, you're what I think what you're trying to ask, and I'm just guessing here, is how can you tell the difference?
yes, like like I have to look at the recording, but like the way you said it, I cannot repeat it right now. But like the difference between like a generic non-criteria versus a criteria that's specific to that individual.
Yeah. Well, basically, you'll hear the same type of answers you usually get. Well, I want something that's in your business with real estate education and people making a change in their career. Well, I want something that's going to be a challenge and something that's going to be fun and rewarding, right? That's not the real answer.
Yeah, like something like that was kind of generic versus, I guess you have to dig in and, well, you have to use common sense. Like, well, like what you just said is that's not the real answer per se.
Well, what'll happen is that they'll put a little emphasis on it, that you'll hear it. Or if you're face to face, you'll see it. So, I want like, something that's fun, rewarding, and a challenge, right? You'll hear their voice change a little bit. They'll put a little emphasis on it. And after a while, you'll start to train your ear to be able to hear when they're putting a little emphasis on it. Generally, if you ask the question right, then you'll get that. But here's the other way to go about doing it. So if you're having a hard time getting what they want, right, understanding what's important to them, I would suggest it's probably because the person hasn't thought about it, because they've never been asked. How often, Michael, you're new here. How often have you been asked what's important for you? Like, let's say you were thinking about doing a role in a play.
Yeah,
what's
sure.
important for you in this role?
Yeah, it's exactly like you said. How often have I been asked that question?
Right. You never, essentially.
Never. Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, but if I was to, okay, I understand. No, most people don't ask. So just to get a clearer picture, what are you not getting in some of the roles that you've had?
Like you're asking me, like as somebody who's offering me a job, or just somebody? Okay.
Yeah. And we've got a lot of roles, so I'm just wondering what in some of the roles that you've had, what did you not get out of them?
Like you said, I hardly ever think about this question. I usually think about all the things that I do get, and how much it pays too.
Well, yeah, that's important. But sometimes it could be you don't get to play the villain. You don't get to have
okay, I see what you mean. Yeah, that's like maybe I get stuck typecast or something like that. Yeah, like I don't get to play outside of my range or my type or whatever.
Right. So and what would that be?
Like you say, I don't get to play maybe the showiest role or something because I get stuck for my age or whatever. I get stuck, so somebody older than me gets to play the lead or something like that, or gets to play the strongest character or something like that.
Right. Yeah, I understand that, and sometimes that's difficult. But we have a role that actually, it is the lead role. You may have to play a little more mature, but there's a youthful quality about it as well that we want to make sure we're keeping to. So, I think this could be something that you could do, but if you'd like to try out for it, we'd love to have you do that.
Oh, that would be fantastic. Yeah.
Right. You see, so that's actually bringing out from the back way
Right.
what you actually want.
Right.
Right. Because again, it's sometimes, Mark, and this was just illustrated for you. If you ask them, well, I'm just curious, what are you not getting in what you're doing right now?
Oh, so it's like finding out what they don't want.
Most people know what they don't want. They've been thinking a lot about what they don't want. A lot of people don't really think
And then
in detail about what they do want, but they certainly have thought a lot about what they don't want.
yeah, that definitely. I see that a lot. I guess that's part of human nature. They focus on what they don't want, so they have clarity on what they don't want as opposed to what they actually do want. So
Generally,
it's like a backdoor approach.
Yeah. Because if they're not able to tell you what they do want, it's generally because they spent most of their time thinking about what they don't want.
Okay.
Yeah, it's true. As soon as you asked the question, I was like, I don't want a small role or something or whatever. All the
Yeah, I don't want a small role. It's like I'm not a small actor. So.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes, that's true.
But so you don't want a small role. Okay, so like how big a role do you want?
Oh, as big as the show entails, the biggest one that's available, or the lead, obviously, if I can get it, obviously.
So what's stopping you?
Or if it's not the lead, then it's the one that's going to steal the show.
That's always good too.
Yeah. Yeah. Then I'm thinking about, can I make the biggest impact, and then I'll have get the same pay. There's all these things that come up.
Right, exactly, and so that's why it was, because you're not used to expressing it as well, and that's not atypical, and it's mostly because people haven't asked.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
It's that it's easier to express sometimes what you don't like.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And in a certain sense, it's safer, like it feels safer to say that than to kind of, expose a little bit who you are,
mm-hmm.
About what you want. Right. Because it seems a little safer, but it's actually not. And I'll tell you why. Because if you don't ask, you don't get.
I was just going to say that. Yeah, exactly.
Right. So if you don't go for it, you're not going to get it. Yeah. And that's why I would say for you, it's actually, I know you've done primarily theater, but if you can do, movies and TV and stuff like this, there's a lot of really good writing done on that right now. TV is really good writing now. So especially with Amazon and Netflix producing their own, Hulu producing its own, even like parts of, there's independent things going up all over the place. There's a lot of opportunity. So, stage is a little tough because there's fewer stage actors right now too. So people aren't even thinking in those terms because it's much more expensive.
Right now, stages are struggling right now, unfortunately.
It's expensive.
Yeah.
When you think about it. And so because it's an ongoing thing, right? As opposed to, especially video production and things like that, the cost of the equipment has come down quite a lot. Where you get great quality, where you can even, people are doing stuff on their phone even. That's how good the quality has gotten. So there's a lot more opportunity for the creativity piece, to come in. So I would encourage you to think about it. There might be opportunities. Also, to my understanding, it's easier to steal scenes, on video than it is on stage because people can see you closer.
Yeah, everything is on the screen.
Well,
you can't hide anything.
The biggest one was Alan Hale Sr., when he was in he was in a lot of the Errol Flynn movies.
Oh yeah. Oh
He
yeah.
used to steal the scene, like just by doing little things, like he fixes his belt buckle at the right time or something like that, and just like totally take over the scene.
Yeah, draw focus and everybody's looking at him. Yeah, for
Yeah,
sure.
exactly. It used to drive Errol Flynn crazy. So questions. Any questions on objections for the moment? I know we kind of wandered a little bit, but it was a little fun because it all comes down to, if you're dealing with objections, then you're not getting the criteria and values first. So if you get that, well, it's the first way to deal with objections, is not to have them. But if you do get objections, it's essentially, there's a pattern going on there. So interrupt that pattern and then just go into some of the different ways to do it. Whether you're asking, for the second part of the equation, or if you get the second part of the equation and take it where you're actually using a story, or you're actually breaking it down into the different component pieces to find out what's really driving that objection. So there's a couple of different ways to do it. It's a lot of fun to not have them, but when you're comfortable handling them, it's just easy to move forward. So, questions? Richard, do we answer your questions? Or is Richard still working?
Yeah,
Mark,
thank you very much.
Mark, do we answer your questions?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm definitely more. I see a bigger picture now in terms of how the whole interchange is gone, and how to handle any kind of
I'm a little
dispute
curious. What do they teach you at where you are?
Well, they at the regular sales training that we have, it's really like basically it's not as in depth. It's really as like very like they don't ask you like what's important to you about becoming a real estate investor. What's important to you about getting involved with.
Mark, did we lose it? Mark, did we lose? And we might have lost him. Okay, Michael, any questions?
I think you covered it pretty well in that last example. I got that pretty quickly after a while. It took me a bit in the beginning, but I got there. I was like, yeah, I like it.
Good. Well, look out for more announcements. This will be I'm going to be putting out a personal development program soon as well, which I think you'll enjoy. And then we'll have the probably at some point the NLP practitioner. Mark, are you back?
Yeah.
Yeah, so, you kind of fell off.
Yeah, my internet got disrupted.
Ah, well.
Sorry about that.
Not your fault. Unless, of course, somebody was hacking into your system. So.
Oh yeah, that's still not my fault. But anyway, what was I saying? I was saying, oh yeah, it's very cut and dry. The sales and marketing training that the organization that I work with has to offer the affiliate members.
Well, what do they say?
Oh, basically they want to ask, there's a 4-step process, right? It's like, they got find the people, tell the story, but the story is not the way how you find it, and bring them to a presentation and then follow up, and then ask them for the sale of the education.
Okay.
And it's dragged out, so over time people lose interest, and there's a big disconnect. It's gonna take like it's gonna take time to go through the whole process, but that's the gist of it. And
Okay,
there's a
yeah.
high even if we when we get the enrollment, there's
Mhm.
high turnover.
Yeah. Okay. So
And that's the system that I was working with before I came upon this community.
okay. So how's it going now? Is it better?
It's better, and I revamped it. I on a personal level, like I'm still working with them, but I'm much more as an affiliate level as opposed to a how can I say this? Like it's a component of my business, not my primary business. For a time being, it was like my primary business.
Okay.
So with this kind of training, it does help immensely, and I'm hoping to, without causing any waves or ruffle any feathers, sort of slide this in to help the other members of that community.
Or you can just make a lot more money with it, and then they'll say, "Well, how are you doing that?"
That is true. That is true too. Every other Monday night.
Yeah, well, every other Monday night. Yes. So if you guys have any ideas for topics, send them over to me, because we want to cover everything that you want to know about this stuff, and make it applicable to the stuff that you're doing in your regular daily lives. Because a lot of the problem is a lot of people think it's only when they're doing a certain thing that they should use these skills. These are just really advanced communication skills at the end of the day, and so that's why use them all the time. It's the easiest way to practice, the easiest way to get good at it, and you'll get a lot more stuff. So good. So this was fun. Thanks very much for coming. Positive feedback is always appreciated, and I will see you guys in 2 weeks.
2 weeks. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Have a good one.
You too.
Stay safe.
Definitely. We'll try.